Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite
Self-acclaimed
podcast.
technology
I'm your host,
A&R
Ross
man. Is
Rich,
that
and
what we're
we have
gonna
a
do?
very, very
Yes, I
special
like it.
guest today.
Okay,
A
let's do
unique
it.
one here. We have Dan
Um,
Triple D, the
cool. You ready to
self-acclaimed
roll? We're
technology
gonna do it.
A&R man,
Let's
and
do
we'll
it.
get into what that actually
Hey
means. But we're
everyone,
keeping it
welcome back to your
provocative and
favorite
ambiguous
podcast.
today.
I'm your
Is
host
the
Ross
theme,
Rich, and we have a very,
I'm already
very
pulling this
special
from our
guest
conversation
today.
before, Dan.
But
A unique
let's get
one
into it.
here.
And
We
yeah,
have
thanks so much for
Dan
making the time
Triple
today.
D,
It's my
the
pleasure, Ross. Thanks for having
self-acclaimed
me.
technology A&R man. We'll
So
get into
yeah, maybe
what
before we get
what that
into
actually
some of
means, but
the
we're keeping it
tips and
provocative
tricks and
and
sales
ambiguous
stuff, like
today. Is the
who are
theme?
you? I'm already pulling
And
in some of our
why have
conversation
so
before,
many
Dan.
people
But let's get
told me
into it.
that
And
we
yeah,
need
thanks so
to
much for
that we
making
need
the
to
time
chat
today.
and have you on the
It's my
podcast
pleasure,
today?
Ross. Thanks for having
Well,
me. I will humbly
So
suggest
yeah,
that
maybe
probably
before
the
we
reason
get
is
into
because
some of
of
the
the
tips
core
and
value
tricks and
proposition that you've
sales stuff,
developed and
like
you're bringing to market
who
for
are
Accord,
you?
making sales
And
professionals
why
more
have so many
productive. And it's a
people
passion
told
of
me
mine
that
because I grew up in
we need
sales
to chat
in
and
the
have you on the
software
podcast
industry.
today?
And I'm pretty
well,
one-dimensional.
I
I've spent
will
my entire
humbly
career,
suggest that probably the reason is because of
37
the
years. When I hear
core
myself
value
say that, I think,
proposition
who
that
am I
you've
talking
developed
about?
and
That
you're bringing
can't
to
be me. Am
market
I
for
that old?
Accord.
Making sales
I've spent
professionals
in
more productive. And
enterprise
it's a
software
passion of mine
sales,
because I grew up in
and for the
sales
last
in
20
the
years of that,
software
it's in what we
industry.
now call the
And I'm pretty
cloud. Even though
one-dimensional.
early
I've
on,
spent my
we didn't
entire
call it that at
career
Salesforce.
and my lineage is
7 years.
tell
When I hear
anybody can see
myself
on
say that, I
LinkedIn
think,
is,
who am I talking
right
about?
out
That
of
can't be
college,
me. Am I that old?
computer science, then business school.
I've spent
and then
in
Oracle,
enterprise
Sybase,
software
Siebel
sales,
Systems,
and for
Salesforce,
the
where I
last
was for
20
almost
years of
12
that, it's in
years,
what we now call the
building and
cloud.
running the
Even
enterprise
though
sales
early on,
team.
and
We
then
didn't
after
call it
that, I
that at
retired
Salesforce.
unsuccessfully.
And my
Meaning
lineage,
I
as you can
still
tell
had
anybody
anybody
can
can
see
see
on
in
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn
is
right out of
helping
college,
others
computer science, then
and
business school,
enjoying
and
this
then
game.
Oracle,
The
Sybase,
industry
Siebel
we work in,
Systems,
and the kind of
Salesforce, where I
conversations we
was
find
for almost
ourselves
12
in, and the
years,
challenges we take
building
on,
and running the
I
enterprise
find
sales
very
team. And
stimulating
then after
and
that, I retired
very
unsuccessfully, meaning
gratifying
still
to
had
help
an
others
itch to
now on the
scratch
journey that
of
I've navigated
helping
personally over the
others
course of my career.
and so I
enjoying this
invest
game.
time, energy,
The industry we
money,
work in and the kind of conversations we find
I
ourselves in
do
and the
that
challenges we
as a
take on,
board
I
advisor,
find
board
very
member,
stimulating
and I'm exec chair of a handful of companies,
gratifying to help
private equity
others now on
firm,
the journey that I've
and I
navigated
also
personally
serve as
over
kind
the
of a
course of
free
my
agent
career.
helping entrepreneurs and expansion
Invest
stage
time,
founders
energy,
and CEOs
money,
navigate their company
I do that
specifically
as
in
a
cloud,
board advisor,
B2B,
board member,
application software companies.
and I'm exec
So
chair
the
of a
A&R
handful of
analogy, as
companies
we were
and a
talking
private
about
equity
before
firm.
we
And
started
I
recording,
also serve as
is
kind of a free
I'm a big
agent
music
helping
fan. If I was in my other
entrepreneurs
room,
and
you'd see
expansion
guitars
stage
hanging on the wall.
founders and
And
CEOs
like with your background,
navigate
Ross,
their companies
from being in the music
specifically
industry,
in cloud,
the A&R
B2B,
person, they always said
application
A&R
software
man, which is
companies.
kind of sexist.
So the
It
A&R
could,
analogy, as we were
could be
talking
some
about
really
before we
powerful, successful
started
women in that
recording,
role too.
is
But the
I'm a big
A&R
music
specialist,
fan.
if I was in my
Artist
other
and
room, you'd see
repertoire, I think,
guitars
is
hanging
very
on the wall.
analogous to what I do.
And like with your
I
background,
enjoy
Ross, from being in the
introducing
music industry,
entrepreneurs
the A&R
and business
person,
leaders
they always said A&R
in
man,
this
which is kind
industry
of
who can
sexist.
help
It
each other,
could,
who have an intersection
be
of their
some really
interests and are
powerful,
trying to solve
successful women
some
in
of the
that role
problems we
too.
maybe partner
But the
together or
A&R
inspire each
specialist,
other.
artist and repertoire, I think is very
A
analogous
lot of
to
very
what I
generous
do.
mentors have done that
I
for
enjoy
me throughout my career, and it led
introducing
to a lot of career
entrepreneurs
opportunities,
and business
investment
leaders
opportunities that now
in this
define
industry who
how
can
I
help
spend my
each other,
time.
who have an intersection of their interests and are trying
Amazing,
to solve
amazing.
similar problems, could
Well,
maybe
definitely
partner
sounds
together
like
or inspire each
you're in
other.
the right place for
And
folks listening.
a lot of
Mostly,
very generous mentors
sales
have
and
done that
revenue
for
leaders
me throughout
at
my career, and it led to a lot
technology
of career
companies in
opportunities, investment
upmarket
opportunities that now
enterprise
define
sales. So
how I
excited
spend
to
my
learn
time.
from your incredible career here.
Amazing,
And
amazing.
just to note,
Well,
I think
definitely
the
sounds
companies you
like
mentioned, a lot
you're
of
in the
them
right
define
place
what
for folks
we
listening.
consider
Mostly,
sales
very
excellence.
revenue
We're
leaders,
going to deal excellence, which is a lot of the stuff we're
technology
going to be
companies
talking about
in
today. To
upmarket
get into things and
enterprise
hit the ground
sales. So
running,
excited to learn
we
from
asked you for three
your
tips
incredible career
around
here and
operationalizing
just
deal
to note,
excellence.
I think
Whatever
the
companies
companies
you
you
mentioned,
mentioned,
a lot of them
successful.
define what
And
no
no surprise,
the
the
first
consider
one is sales excellence. Who are you actually selling to? Before we get into a lot of the stuff we're going to be establishing about today, ICP, to get into things and hit the ground running. Profile. What does
we
that
asked you
mean
for
to
3
you?
tips around
Well, first of all, what it means is
operationalizing
it's
deal
one of my
excellence,
favorite
what every
opening
revenue leader
conversations
needs
when I'm
to do to
working
be
with a new
successful.
team. And no surprise, the
When
first
any,
one
and I think
is,
even if you get into a
who are you
rhythm
actually
with a team
selling
you've
to
been working
before we
with
get
for a
into
while,
the
it's good to
details,
challenge yourself
establishing your
occasionally by re-asking
ICP,
very simple
aka
questions. And you
ideal
just posed
customer
it.
profile.
What
What
does
does
that
that mean to you?
And it's often
Well,
labeled
first
as
of all,
the
what it means
ideal
is it's
customer
one of my
profile,
favorite
the
opening
ICP.
conversations when I'm working
And
with
the
a new
reason
team,
I'm very
or when
spiritual,
and
and
I
I
think
think
of
of a better
word
word
about
about
the
the
rhythm
ICP
with the team you've been
is
working
I
with
think
for a while. It's
most
good to challenge yourself
organizations
occasionally
don't have
by
a very
re-asking a very
well-developed
simple
one.
question. And you
Meaning
just posed it.
there might
Who
be
are we
some
selling
shared
to?
consciousness
And
around
it's
what
often
we're
labeled
looking
as
for,
the ideal
but it's not
customer
documented,
profile,
and
the
most
ICP.
importantly, it's not.
And the
something
reason
we
I'm
train
very
and
spiritual,
drill
for
our
lack of a better word,
customer-facing
about the
teams
ICP
is I think
how
most
to understand
organizations
it and act
don't have
upon
a
it.
very
And
well-developed
that's true
one.
for new
Meaning
logo
there might be some
pursuits,
shared
upsell,
consciousness around
cross-sell
what we're looking
pursuits.
for,
You know, the
but
ICP
it's not
is not just
documented, and most importantly, it's
industry.
not
It's
something we
company size.
train and
It's
drill
use cases.
our
It's
customer-facing
personas
teams
within those
in
organizations.
how
It
to
should be very
understand it and
granular
act
down to
upon it.
And that's now it should lead you logically to, okay, what are the campaigns we're going to run now to get access to those people, if that's all right. The ICP is not just
the flip side of that
industry.
is that
It's company size.
Somebody much wiser than I once said,
it's
if you don't know where you're
going,
then any road will
should
take
be
you
very
there.
granular,
And that defines how marketing it should lead you logically to, okay, what are the campaigns we're going to run now to get access to those people, if that's all right.
Got it. So if you had to
the flip side of that is that
3 heuristics,
somebody much wiser than I once said,
if
you don't know where you're going, then any road
three
will take
things
you
that they
there.
were confident on.
And that
What would it be?
defines
Would it
how
be
company
size? Would it be
budgets are
persona?
largely
Would it
spent
be
in software
what would the
companies.
3 things that you think are most powerful? Got it. So if you had to pick this across dozens of businesses, because 3 heuristics, I think a lot of people criteria. Some of those things aren't as strong as close as possible. As you would think. 3 things that they're confident on. What would it be? Would it be is actually more important? Size? Would it be persona? Would it be 500 person? What would the 3 things that you think are this type of most powerful from your? You can get this across dozens and dozens of businesses. What are the things I think a lot of people are like. Some of those, or is it just as strong as depends on the business, as you would think? In my experience,
Moses came down from the mountain
is actually more important. It could be a 50-person company, 500
characteristics of the ICP.
You talk to
what I
this type
think
of
would
person,
be on the stones.
you can get the deal done.
One of them would be,
so what are the things that you are like?
One of the most basic ones that
or
a lot of organizations struggle with in debate, and debate is good.
Moses came down from the mountain and the tablets instead of
rally behind and say,
were characteristics of the ICP.
Here's what I think would be on the stones.
By size, I mean,
one of them would be SMB. Mid-market,
I think
or one of the most basic ones.
Now we could
a
talk
lot of
for
organizations
hours about
struggle
what
with
that means,
debate.
but let's just
and debate is
that
good
there for now,
as long as it results in
so that's again
to the analogy with
music.
Rally behind.
Okay,
and say, we're going to put our energy and time and money behind this.
Okay,
and by size, I mean, of course. Now,
are we SMB?
What melody could we lay over that?
Enterprise
it's
focused?
almost infinite.
Now, we could talk for
hours about what
the
that
melody
means,
to me
is. Okay,
leave that there for now.
Are you a horizontal?
So that's
solution,
again to the
which analogy with music.
Say, oh well, we're horizontal. We don't really sell to just one industry.
A chord
I think that can be very dangerous because the lack of an ICP or lack of focus. What melody could we lay over that? Well, it's almost infinite possibilities.
Insidious.
The melody to
conditions
me
a
is
seller
okay.
could face.
Industry, meaning,
are you a horizontal?
If I have
solution,
a horizontal
which a lot of
solution
companies
that
will
anybody
say,
can
we're
use
horizontal. We don't really
to solve any problem.
I think that can be very dangerous
in any size
lack of an
organization
ICP or lack of focus
is one of the
then
most
I have no idea
frustrating
who to pick up the phone and call,
and
or who to go online
in
and try to reach out
insidious
to,
conditions
or what
a
conversation
seller
even
can
to
face.
have with them.
Meaning,
we need
if
to
I have
lead
a
the
horizontal
witness.
solution
The audience
that anybody
wants us
can
to say,
use to
okay,
solve any
I can solve a
problem,
problem. Here's the
outcome I
anytime
can create and see
in
them
any
help me
size
save money or make
organization.
money. We don't do anything else in this industry.
Then I have no idea who to pick up the phone,
product or service,
or who to go online.
You're either helping a company make money
or what conversation
or
even
save
to
money.
have with them.
Now,
we need to
once you
lead the
decide,
witness.
and you
The
can major
audience
in one
wants
and
us to
minor in
say,
the other. I see
okay,
that a lot.
I can solve a
But
problem.
that's
Here's
where
the
the
outcome I can
conversation
create
gets
and see them
interesting.
help you
Okay,
save
how
money or
do you
make
do
money.
that?
And we
don't
tend
do
to
anything
start
else
the
in this
conversation
industry,
with
no matter
how
what you sell,
the marketplace
product
doesn't
or
give a shit
service,
about until we've
you're
given
either
them
helping a
reason to
company
care
make money
by saying, here's the outcome
or save
we
money.
created. So you start
Now,
with an outcome.
once you decide, and you could major in one and minor in the other.
The big
I see that a
pillars,
lot.
you know,
but that's where the
tablets, if you will, from Moses.
Okay, how do you do
It's
that? And we tend to
company
start the
size,
conversation
mid-market,
with
SMB,
which the marketplace doesn't give a shit about until we've given are
them
we
a reason to
industry oriented?
care. Are we
By
selling
saying,
the
here's the
government,
outcome we
manufacturing,
create. So you
distribution, start with an outcome,
healthcare,
it leads you to a use
finance,
case, a persona.
So again,
the big pillars.
hopefully
we
we have a story built around
the
that.
tablets, if you will, from Moses.
That audience.
It's company size,
and then
mid-market, SMB,
finally,
enterprise. It's industry.
What
are we industry
in
oriented?
the
Are we
ICP?
selling to government,
size company?
What industry are they in? The persona, as you mentioned, that we're selling to is important.
Hopefully, we have a story built around that, so we can kind of like again in the music audience. Every artist has an audience,
and then
to the extent that they understand their audience and what their audience is in the ICP
to, right?
The
size
audience
company,
for
what
Pearl
industry
Jam
are they in
today?
The persona, as you mentioned,
see them
that
this
we're
summer in
selling
Chicago,
to is important to get your mind around.
Is at least a bit different
kind of
than
like
the audience
again,
for, let's say, BTS. Every artist has an audience, and to the extent that they understand their audience and what their audience, a little different.
I'm not sure there's any overlap.
The audience
and the audience
for
BTS and
today,
but yet.
I'm going to go see them.
They're both selling a lot of records.
We used to call them records.
At least a bit different than the audience.
They're both making a lot of money
BTS,
filling stadiums,
which is kind of the only way to make money in the music.
A little bit different, yeah.
A little different. I'm not sure there's any
their audiences
overlap
are dramatically
the audience
different.
for BTS
So,
and Pearl Jam.
if we're a new band,
does that mean okay, we're going to pick that one or that one? No, our audience could be something entirely different. But understanding
they're both
that
making a lot
audience,
of money filling stadiums,
which is kind of the only way to
the
make
really
money in
great
the
bands
know
that
have an intimate
merchandise
relationship with their
but
audience.
their audiences are dramatically different.
There's a podcast, and he's
if we're a
probably
new
done it many
band,
times, but
listen to
does that
Bruce
mean okay, we're going
Springsteen,
to
I
pick
think
that one or that one? No, our audience
Howard
could be
Stern
something
interview,
entirely
and he
different.
talks, but understanding
in these
that
very
audience,
intimate, personal terms about his relationship.
The really
with
great
his
bands
audience.
know that have an
And I find that to be so sincere and
with their
authentic.
audience.
But he really gets it. And
there's a
it
podcast, and
informs
he's
the
probably done
music
it many
that he
times.
writes
But
for
listen to
them.
Bruce Springsteen,
and they reward him by
Howard Stern
filling up
interview,
stadiums
and he
everywhere
talks.
goes. in these very intimate personal terms about his relationship with his audience.
To simplify,
and I find that to be so sincere and authentic.
Talk about,
but he really gets it, and
these personas,
it informs the music
people and
that
they
he
have jobs.
writes to
So
them.
thinking about like
and they reward him by filling up stadiums everywhere he goes.
Right. And do we deeply understand them? If it's broad across every vertical, I think every size, to simplify, we're not going to get sales in a lot of ways. It's not going to resonate with what we're saying to them. Persona is never going to resonate. There's people that have jobs.
Any more so than if you and I started a band today, that we should expect to have some
and do we deeply
14-year-old kids in the audience and 60-year-old dudes.
Every size business, like we're not going to get deep. We're not going to.
You got to understand your audience and figure out who are we writing and performing for. What do they respond to? Exactly. Any more so than if you and I started a band today.
Let's assume and we should expect. We have our ICP. We're a company. We're focused on mid-market deals. And selling to
you got to understand your audience and figure out who are we writing and performing for. What do they respond to?
All that great stuff. Love it. Well, now you have a sales. Let's assume that we have our ICP. And I know you mentioned one of your points around company. We're focused on doing this consistently, not just once a year at SKO. selling to the CIOs, what are the things that you would prioritize? A really clear story around how we save the money, a clear ICP, all that great stuff to make them effective in the field. How do you make them effective?
First of all,
I know you mentioned one of your points around training folks and doing this consistently, not just once a year at SKO,
or not at all.
What are the things that you would prioritize in terms of arming your sellers?
The training and enablement is a how. So let's set that aside
to make them effective in the
field. Outcome that we see. So that all that money, time, and energy goes. One of my favorite conversational topics. Outcome I see it is done sales readiness poorly or not at all. Ultimately, the measure is sales performance, and that is a percentage of your the training and enablement. We're trying to move the dial upwards. Let's set that aside for a moment. Take some metrics that every sales leader can relate to. That all that money, win rate goes towards that we call training. I'd like some of that. Okay, is sales. Would you like your average deal size to go? Ultimately, the measure is sales performance. Would you like your average sales cycle length to compress? So if we're trying to move the dial upwards, count me in. Let's take some metrics that every sales leader can relate to. We want our win rate to go up. Second tier performance. I'd like some of that. Like on the leaderboard, the people that are not. Would you like your average deal size? Would you like to see them? I'd love some of that. More frequently. Would you like your average sales cycle month to quarter to quarter or annual basis? Absolutely. Count me in. Give me some of that. Would you like? And if you look at the measure. Now, traditionally, we can point to training and enablement as a way to get that done by on the leaderboard, making sure people that are not in the top 5 methods. Would you like to literally the more frequently chords and lyrics? Top 5. If we're going to stick with the music analogy, annual basis are consistent. Yes, give me some of the way that we're. And if you look at the measures, delivering them. So now, again, the best way to get your B player, your traditionally B players performing like your A players, is to get them behaving like your A players, and that means tools, methods, the scripts. And I'm talking about by scripts, I'm talking about how do we open a conversation with discovery in a compelling, and I would say, and we'll come back to this theme, provocative and ambiguous way. We'll come back to what I mean by that. How do you conduct the sales conversation further in a way that differentiates your product and solutions? How do you handle objections in a way that you should welcome objections and say, an objection is basically a roadblock that sits in front of you and you got to pick it up and move it so you can continue driving down the road. Otherwise, you're stuck in idle. All that needs to be drilled and practiced in training and enablement. But the content that you develop is hinges on all those things that define our identity, our ICP, our solution identity. And I see a lot of organizations underserve that agenda. I think training and enablement should be like a band rehearsing. You don't show up for a live gig and play a brand new song you've never played together before. It's also the reason when Pearl Jam's playing, they don't take requests from the audience on spontaneously. I mean, they probably could because they're that good, but they're not going to play anything they haven't rehearsed because they want to sound their best for that, because they care about the audience and that relationship.
And who's responsible? I think you nailed it. And I agree with you in terms of how consistent is this done well? Very inconsistently from my experience, but who is responsible at the end of the day for, I love how you call it, like the readiness of their sales organization, for the preparation of their AEs to spend you invest in the product, you've invested in the marketing, you have this team here, all this money for where rubber meets the road, and for them to have conversations with customers. Who is at the end of the day responsible for both the curriculum of that, like having all those things defined, and making sure that gets done on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
It's a great question. I think traditionally the person held responsible, and I think probably appropriately, is the chief revenue officer. So she or he should be, and usually is, the one in the organization obsessing the most over this conundrum, which is, how do we get Jane Doe and John Doe, who are usually, in spots, 10 to 20 on the leaderboard? How do we get them up to the top 10? And what is happening with the people in the top 10 consistently that is not happening with Jane and John? Is it methods, tools, the talk track, the skills that these people have that these people haven't developed? Is it experience? And we should continually obsess over that. That is a very worthy domain of debate and argument. And I see it this way. No, I see it that way. Great, let's debate it. But ultimately, we got to agree, here are the skills we want our people to have or to improve, right? And in a band, you might say, okay, we, we've written good melodies and great lyrics, but our live performances are really inconsistent. Sometimes we're bringing the energy, sometimes we're not, and what you work on in rehearsal is tightening. Like when you hear a band that's really good, I'm used to hearing, real musicians. I'm just a poser. I'm an imposter. But, real musicians will often use phrases like, boy, they were tight. They were woven, right? And it's almost like improvisational jazz, where we hear musicians just improvise, but in a way that sounds rehearsed. Well, it's because they have so much skill and experience, they can almost read each other's minds and where they're going. And I think great sales organizations, when probably unachievable state of grace for a sales organization is to feel like you are, Coltrane and Miles Davis and, and a great jazz greats that can improvise their way into anything. And it seems random when you're watching the improvisation, but in fact, it's rooted in some fundamental skills they've all developed, they've mastered, and it sounds spontaneous and ad hoc when in fact it's not.
Well, I think you're hitting on a misconception in the industry that I think is still super prevalent, which is the best sellers, the best sales teams, the best leaders are just incredible sellers. They were born that way. They showed up this way. And like you're saying, like look at any other industry to become great, to become an amazing athlete, to do the stuff that the best NBA players, NFL, whatever it is, anything, any elite person in their craft is practice. But for some reason in sales, it's just like, oh, they're just an amazing seller. They're amazing at talking to customers. It has nothing to do with this stuff.
I couldn't agree more, Russ. I think what you'll find is the more people, you probably have friends, Ross, like I do, who will talk about sales excellence or talk about revered sales pros or sales leaders that they respect and maybe have been mentors of theirs, and they talk about them. And oftentimes it's attributable to innate skills that people are born with. I share your view that it's not just nature. I think it's more nurture than nature. Case in point, there was also a misconception, I think, in a generation that I grew up in, which is that it's pretty much only extroverts who are going to be great sales people or sales leaders. And in my experience, some of the most credible, most powerful, badass, dangerous salespeople are introverts, very cerebral, thoughtful, introverted people who aren't the first one to show up in the room loud and tell jokes and lead the conversation, but are picking their spots and measuring. And then when they do contribute something, the reaction is like, oh, fuck, that was really insightful. Like, what that guy or that girl just say? Wow, clearly you've been paying attention. You've been kind of quiet up till now, but you just nailed it. And then it raises the level of the discourse in the room. And I think everybody ends up smarter as a result of it. When I'm interviewing people, sales professionals, sales leaders, when I was younger, I always thought, oh, you got to find the gregarious person. I've really changed my view over the years. You can come from many different personalities and styles to be successful, but the skills you want your people to have and the tools you're going to use to teach them, that's the responsibility of a CRO, the CEO. Oftentimes now you'll find somebody assigned with the responsibility of being a head of rev ops, revenue operations, or sales operations, sales ops. That's usually where training and enablement lives. Sometimes it reports to a CRO. Sometimes it's next to the CRO. If it's part of HR and it's blended with the rest of learning management, it's probably going to get diluted a bit, although you might use some of the same tools and platforms. But I think that should be a powerful senior level leadership role in a software company, is somebody in charge of, and I like to say, the chief productivity officer. And I think when you raise the importance of that role, it's like the trend line, which I happen to also advocate, which is HR leaders should report to a CEO, not the old school way to a CFO. Now, we could debate that all day, but the contemporary thinking around sales training and enablement, is when I was CEO of Spring CM here in Chicago, a friend of mine from my days at Salesforce and earlier came over to run that function, and we gave him the title Chief Sales Productivity Officer.
Mm.
It wasn't enablement.
So it's the outcome.
It's the outcome. Enablement training is the method. The outcome is sales productivity.
Totally. Well, before we wind up here, I'm super curious, and I'm sure the audience is too, is if you were to prioritize, let's say you only had 2, maximum 3 things to have this chief productivity officer, or you were a CRO at a company, you know the space, B2B, let's call it enterprise application software. What are the 2 or 3 skills or tactics or, out in the field execution abilities that you would invest in to up level those B players to execute like the A players out there? What are the specific things that they could get better at that you would feel confident is going to get closer to quota for the rest of the team?
It's a great question, Ross. And I think it's a bit of a holy grail in our business. The answer will vary in terms of how you go about doing it for companies in different market segments, and what persona are we serving, what's our solution identity. But what does not change is the fundamental, which I believe there's one thing you want your salespeople to be expert in. It's the customer. It's not your technology. It's not the use cases. It's not the specific technical or functional problems that we solve and how we solve them, because salespeople get horny for how, and we want to tell everybody the how. Look how we do this. And if I'm in the audience, I often call timeout and say, you haven't given me a reason to care. Make me
the why
by telling me the what. What's the outcome? So if I'm the customer, the best thing that, let's say, Ross, you're being trained in how to sell to me. I'm the customer.
Yep.
You need to understand me, my role, the industry that I play in, what are the pressures that I'm under, regulatory pressures, competitive pressures. If I'm a CIO in a bank, let's say, what do I probably get worried about? What are the stresses and sources of anxiety in my life? And I believe that people buy for only 2 motivations. We talked earlier about the only 2 things we can do for a company, that we sell a product or a service, especially in technology. It's make money or save money. So now let's flip it around. The reason people buy is driven by either greed or fear. That's it. There's the only 2 motivations that result in us pulling out a checkbook or digitally transacting, and, in particular in B2B, but it's probably true in B2C as well. Now, I love debating that because I'll often be challenged by that. Oh, wait a minute, hold on a second. Let's look at some examples. And in every example we could talk about, if we spent 5 hours here, I could boil every one of them down to that was rooted in greed. I want to make more money, increase revenue, increase profits. All right, greed. If you believe Gordon Gekko from Wall Street, Michael Douglas, greed is good. Okay. Now, fear. Fear is, it could be a lot of things. Fear going out of business, fear about not making payroll, fear of our competitors, stealing our lunch money in the marketplace, fear of losing our talent. And given the choice, I would rather sell to fear than to greed, because fear you can't put off. Fear is immediate. I got to address this. It's either the avoidance of pain or the removal of pain that I'm currently feeling. That's where purchasing is not optional, and deals tend not to get delayed, and they tend not to get lost to no decision. So it was a long-winded way of answering the question, but if you're going to be expert in one thing, be expert in the customer so you can have intelligent conversations and earn their respect. Here's the other thing salespeople aren't very good at. 2 things, and I think it should be reflected in all of our communications, especially written, and it's relevance and brevity. Most people suck at relevance and brevity, especially sales professionals. We tend to talk about things that we think are interesting, that we assume the customer thinks are interesting and relevant, but it's in the eye of the beholder. The audience will tell us what's relevant and not. So that's where lesson 1, know the customer, comes in. But then brevity, think of how powerful short statements are and how powerful silence is after a punctuation. I just used it there. And I'm not good at silence. I'm the extroverted person on that cycle who talks a lot. So
yeah,
it's a skill you can learn. If I can learn it, trust me, anybody can learn it. How to use silence, how to say less, how to use cadence. And, I've even just slowed down my talking. Like when you want to get an audience to really zone in and you speak a little more quietly and more slowly, you'll subconsciously, you'll hear the audience like leaning in and on their both elbows on the table, like, oh, there's something important here I should listen to. you know, and performers do that too, and they really want to get the audience's attention.
Totally. Yeah. I like how, like you said, even just foundational and basic those things are. It's not get caught up into like, what's the ZOPA and BANT and all these acronyms. And I feel like 90% of my training experience has been in that world, not, you know, who's my customer? How can I be someone that they actually want to spend time talking to because I understand their world and I'm an expert in it.
Yes.
And someone they want to engage with. So I love that. Well, we gotta wrap up. Oh, sorry, go for it.
Yeah, what you just mentioned. The book I recommend to people, especially when my children's friends who have known for decades will say, "Oh, you know, career advice. Let's talk. What should I read?" I'd recommend first and foremost, the first book I'll recommend among many is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, we are a very like-minded person, because I would put that as the #1 business and just human book as well. So I love it. Yeah.
And it hasn't changed. It was written like in the 30s and it's just as relevant today.
100%. Well, I think that's a good maybe theme to jump off at is, you know, at the end of the day, what's the famous quote? Shit, I can't remember it. It's like people's name is the, you know, what's the favorite word of anyone in the world? It's their first name. Knowing them, understanding them, that's how to get people to spend time with you and hopefully to spend money with you. But Triple D, you did not fail. A lot of recommendations to the session with you. I learned a ton. Hopefully the folks out there learned a lot, and really appreciate you taking the time today.
It's my pleasure, Russell.